What if some of the habits we get criticized for, the very things people call us lazy for, are actually signs of something completely different? What if they're signs of a really high IQ? It's a pretty wild idea, but psychology is starting to show it might just be true. I mean, have you ever asked yourself this? Maybe someone's called you lazy, or hey, maybe you've even thought it about yourself, just because you don't operate on the same wavelength as everyone else. Well, we're about to flip that idea on its head. Let's be real, we live in a culture that is obsessed with the hustle, always being on, always moving. But the psychology tells a totally different story. It turns out that a highly intelligent mind often works on a different frequency altogether, one that's way more efficient and finds answers in the quiet moments. Okay, so let's dig into these patterns. We're going to walk through 5 super common habits that get a bad rap for being lazy, but are actually deep down just signs of a highly intelligent brain doing its thing. First up, the messy desk. Does this feel a little too familiar? Maybe one part of your life is a total mess, but another is so perfectly organized it's almost scary. This isn't a character flaw, folks. It's a sign your brain knows exactly where to spend its energy. And this really gets to the core idea of something called mental efficiency. Your brain is making a calculated decision. It's not that it doesn't see the mess. It's that it's decided that building that brilliant new system or solving that huge problem is a much, much better use of its brain power than, alphabetizing the spice rack. So you see this all the time. The desk might be a disaster zone, but the code they're writing is flawless. It's not about laziness at all. It's about a ruthless subconscious focus on what actually creates value for you. All right, next habit. Do you ever find your mind just drifting away during a boring meeting or some other repetitive task? People might think you're not paying attention, but for a gifted mind, the brain is never really off. It's just off creating its own, much more interesting stimulation. There's a fantastic term for this: hyperconnectivity. Your brain isn't just checked out, it's actually lighting up like a Christmas tree, forging these incredible links between ideas that nobody else sees. It's connecting some boring comment in a meeting to a breakthrough idea for that project you're passionate about. So what feels like spacing out is actually a deeply creative, problem-solving state. You're not being absent-minded. You're literally building new worlds and figuring things out in the background. It's a superpower. Okay, let's shift gears to a social one. Do you just dread small talk, that surface-level chit-chat at parties? It can make you feel kind of antisocial, but believe me, there's a really good cognitive reason for it. And it all boils down to this idea of cognitive complexity. See, a highly intelligent brain craves depth. It wants layers. It wants new information to chew on. Small talk? Well, it's the opposite of that. It can feel genuinely exhausting because it's like asking a supercomputer to just run a calculator app all day. And this is exactly why you might love a deep, one-on-one conversation, but feel totally drained by a party. Or why you might actually prefer to just be alone with your own thoughts. You're not antisocial. You're just saving your precious social energy for the conversations that really feed your mind. How about the way you work? Does the whole 9 to 5, slow and steady thing just feel completely unnatural? Are you more of a sprint like crazy than collapse kind of person? Well, that's not inconsistency. It's just a different kind of focus. This actually has roots in our own brain chemistry. A highly intelligent brain is often hardwired for a curiosity-driven dopamine reward system. What gets you going isn't the clock on the wall. It's genuine, electrifying interest in what you're doing. It's the thrill of the chase. This explains so much, doesn't it? It's why you can lock in and get a week's worth of work done in one hyper-focused afternoon, and then maybe look lazy for a couple of days after. That intense burst of focus is so powerful, most people couldn't even handle it. And now, we come to the ultimate so-called lazy habit: procrastination, especially when it comes to those little nagging tasks. We've all been there, but the reason why might be a lot deeper than you think. Psychologists have a name for this too: selective organization. The idea is you're not actually avoiding the work. What's happening is your brain is subconsciously saving its battery, its best processing power, for a much bigger, more important problem that it's working on behind the scenes. So while you're putting off scheduling that dentist appointment, your mind is actually chewing on a way more complicated puzzle. You're not lazy. You're letting your brain collect all the data it needs so that when you do act, you make the best possible choice. You're saving your fuel for what really counts. And that's really the big idea here. When you step back and look at all these habits together, you realize they're not just a bunch of random quirks. They're all connected.
They're features of a very specific and very powerful mental operating system. So let's zoom out for a second and look at this whole thing from a higher level. This isn't just a list of weird habits. It's a totally different way of thinking. It's about shifting our perspective from social judgment to, well, psychological truth. This really puts it all into perspective. Where the world might slap a label on you like lazy, the reality is you're efficient. They say disorganized, but really, you're prioritized. They might call you antisocial, but the truth is you just crave depth. It's a game-changing way to look at yourself.
So what's the takeaway here? What do you do with all this? Well, it's not about making excuses for yourself. It's about understanding how you're wired and then leaning into it. These aren't bugs in your system that need to be fixed. They are features that you can learn to use to your advantage. If you saw yourself in any of this, I want you to really hear this. Your mind is built for independence, for deep thinking, for reflection. You're not overthinking. You're just thinking deeper than most people around you. And that, my friend, is a powerful gift. So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. Now that you've seen how these things can be reframed, what's that one flaw you've always been told you have that might just be your greatest, most unique strength?